Hey there, fellow edibles enthusiasts. It's Margaret here, your host of Bite Me, the show about edibles. Are you ready to take your cannabis education to the next level while connecting with an amazing community of like-minded people? Then let me introduce you to something truly special, the Bite Me Cannabis Club. Imagine this, a welcoming space where you can learn, share, and grow your love for cannabis and making edibles. As a member, you'll get exclusive access to a private podcast feed, workshops, community challenges, live events, and best of all, a safe, supportive community where you can ask questions, share recipes, and bond over your shared passion for cannabis and food. So here's the deal. The doors to the Bite Me Cannabis Club are officially open, and you can be one of the first to join by signing up right now. So don't wait. Head over to joinbiteme.com. That's joinbiteme.com. And let's make 2025 the year you connect, learn, and create with other cannabis lovers in a community like no other. I can't wait to see you there. Welcome, friends, to episode 285. And today we are doing an ingredient deep dive, a big bite into chocolate. Welcome to Bite Me, the show about edibles, where I help you take control of your high life. I'm your host and certified ganger, Margaret, and I love helping cooks make safe and effective edibles at home. I'm so glad you're here. And greeting friends, welcome back to another wonderful episode of Bite Me. I am so glad to be here. It feels like it's been a minute, and that's because I did record and prepare a few episodes in advance because I was going to be away for a week in the sunny South, and I didn't really have anything prepared for when I got back. So it's just nice to get back into my recording space so I can sit down and join all of you. And if you're tuning in for the first time, this will be a fun episode. We are going to be talking about chocolate, seeing as it's already February at the time of this recording. And of course, February often brings to mind Valentine's Day. But what if we just ignored Valentine's Day a little bit and just focused on the things that people really love about Valentine's? And one of those things is chocolate. So we're going to be doing a deep dive, a big bite into chocolate, if you will. And if you've been around for a while, I really appreciate it. I'm so glad that you're here. It's folks like you that really keep the show going. So let's get into it. Before I do this big bite, though, I just wanted to share a few things. And recently I did an episode on 2025 trends in edibles and cannabis. And that was a really fun episode to put together because I reached out to a lot of folks who are working actively in the cannabis community, and they all had their own thoughts around what they thought we would see for this year. But I did ask you, what do you think? And I was not disappointed. There was a number of you that replied, and I have compiled a few of these answers so I can share them with you. So thank you for those who took the time to reach out and let me know what they think we might see for 2025. So first of all, we have a listener who said, I think edibles use will increase in 2025, more brands and options. And that listener wrote in from Watertown, New York via fan mail. I hope you're right, because I would love to see that, more brands and options. And I really do think that the edibles space is expanding quite a bit because a lot of folks, if you listen to that episode, if you haven't listened to it, you should go back and check it out, because it wasn't just me making predictions. It was people who are involved in the cannabis space in a lot of different capacities. And some of them are actively involved in the commercial cannabis space, and they're creating products for the market. And I think that as cannabis becomes more legal in more jurisdictions, a lot of people are becoming more curious about it, more. And one of the easy ways that people are finding their entry into cannabis is through food, which means we're wanting to see some new and exciting things. Because those of us who have been around for a while, we would like to see something a little bit different. So I totally agree with that sentiment. So thank you for sharing that. Next, we have a comment that says, other than seeing our products on every shelf, we would love to see more people talking about microdosing and responsible dosing for a big demographic of users that are new to cannabis or as supplemental use for seniors, people switching from alcohol, etc. We could talk about it for days. And that came from Social Sessions Chocolate via Instagram. So you can find them at Social Sessions Chocolate. and continue the conversation with them over there. And I do think that microdosing and responsible dosing, finding that minimum effective dose, is definitely a smart way to approach cannabis, especially for those who are new, for seniors, people who are wanting to eschew alcohol. And I'm here for that because, of course, there's always going to be people who love those big, heavy doses or require them if it's going to help them feel better because they're using it medicinally. The beautiful thing about cannabis is that it can really be tailored to each individual out there. And I'm not saying cannabis is a panacea by any means. We're all so different. It just doesn't suit some people. Some people don't like the way it makes them feel. But for many folks out there, maybe the big dose doesn't work, but a microdose is what helps them feel better in their body. And I think responsible dosing is always worth talking about. So I really appreciate that comment. Social Sessions Chocolate, thank you for sharing. And last but not least, I predict myself making more edibles in 2025. I will also try my hand at making lip balm, and that came from Bang Switch 2A via the Bite Me Cannabis Club. And I too predict myself making more edibles in 2025, but I love to hear when folks are saying that they're going to try and make an effort to make more edibles in their life. And making lip balm is a wonderful way to include edibles in your world. Even though you're not going to get high from that, I was actually recently at a small event in my city, and a fellow there had made a whole bunch of CBD lip balms and he gave them out, and they are so nice. I just find in the wintertime, I'm in Canada, if you didn't know, and it's cold and my skin gets so dry, which is a complaint that you hear many people talk about because just that cold wind and air in the wintertime is very drying, and the heat that we use to warm our houses. So something like a CBD infused lip balm is a real treat when things are really dry. So making edibles doesn't necessarily have to mean making more things you'll eat. It can be making more things that you'll rub on your body. And I love cannabis topicals so much. I can really get behind that too. Thank you for all those listener predictions. I really appreciated it. And of course, you can still share what you think we might be seeing in 2025. It's still early yet. We're only just a month in. And I'll share them on the show. For another upcoming episode that I would love to do, I would like to compile a list of listener best snacks and recipes and suggestions for an upcoming episode. So those could be things that you love to eat when you're elevated, or they could be specific recipes that you really enjoy to get elevated. Either one, I would love to hear them. And you can let me know a few different ways. You can email me. You can send me a voice message via the podcast hotline. You can send a fan mail. However is easiest for you. I'm also reachable on Instagram, and that's the social platform I tend to be most active on. However you want to get back to me, let me know, because I think it would be a fun episode. It's all fine and dandy for me to talk about the recipes that I want to make and share them with y'all, but sometimes I want to hear about what snacks and recipes you're actually using in your everyday lives. Consider sharing those with me. Now let's get into the subject of chocolate. Chocolate isn't just a treat. If you ask me, it is a vehicle for greatness. So today on Bite Me, we're going to be taking a big bite into why chocolate is the MVP of edibles, how to use it like a pro, and some mind-blowing ways to take your cannabis-infused creations to the next level. And we're going to cover a few different things today. We're going to cover sourcing, trade practices, cooking tips, and some surprising uses you may not have thought of. Without further ado, let's get into everyone's favorite ingredient, chocolate. Now, I do have to say, I realize maybe not everybody is totally as in love with chocolate as I am. And as much as I love chocolate, it's probably not even the top thing that I love to eat that is sweetened, surprisingly enough. There is a reason why chocolate is the best for edibles. The fat content in cacao butter makes it an ideal carrier for THC and other cannabinoids. It can mask the flavor of cannabis better than many other mediums, and it has a long shelf life and is stable at room temperature. So for a lot of those reasons, chocolate really checks all the boxes when it comes to something that you might want to infuse. There's a cultural love affair with chocolate. It's universally loved. Pairing it with cannabis feels like a match made in heaven. It's indulgent, it's comforting, it's versatile. It's no wonder why people reach for chocolate. And I will say one of my favorite ways to consume chocolate, I do like dark chocolate, but I love spicy dark chocolate. I find the mix of spice and chocolate is just one of my favorite things. Chef's kiss. Mwah. I also love the pairing of chocolate and caramel. So who am I kidding? I really do actually like chocolate now that I think about it. But chocolate has been adored for centuries. I like chocolate, you like chocolate, but it dates back to the Meso American cultures like the Aztecs and the Mayans, who revered cacao as a sacred gift from the gods, and I don't think they were wrong. And they consumed it as a bitter, frothy drink mixed with spices like chili, and far from the sweet treat that we're familiar with today. And as we all know, if you take some unsweetened baker's chocolate, it tastes very different than the stuff that we add sugar to, of course. When chocolate made its way to Europe in the 16th century, it was transformed into the creamy, sweet confection that we love, becoming a symbol of luxury and indulgence. And today, chocolate is a global obsession. It's a comfort food, a romantic gesture, a celebratory treat, and pairing it with cannabis feels natural because both are associated with pleasure, relaxation, a touch of indulgence, and maybe even a little medical relief because chocolate was used in a whole lot of ways and was seen to be medicinal in some cultures a long time ago. And chocolate's universal appeal makes it the perfect medium for edibles. It's familiar, approachable, and downright irresistible. And I have over the years made plenty of chocolate-infused recipes of various sorts. And there's a reason why, because it's wonderful. Now, chocolate also contains theobromine, which is a mild stimulant that complements the effects of cannabis. And theobromine is a naturally occurring compound found in cacao beans. It's a mild stimulant and a close chemical relative of caffeine, though it's much gentler on the nervous system. And theobromine, if I'm saying that correctly, of course, provides a subtle energy boost and mood lift, which complements the effects of cannabis. So the difference between theobromine and caffeine is you're probably not going to get that. It's not going to feel like the caffeine boost that you get in the morning, but it's a lot gentler. And for that reason, more people can enjoy it. I know people who have to be very cautious about consuming caffeine, but chocolate is a different story. Now, theobromine is also the reason why chocolate is toxic to dogs. They can't metabolize it like humans can, so keep your cannabis-infused chocolates away from your furry friends. I also understand that THC is not great for dogs, so that's a double whammy. If that is the case, chocolate and cannabis are not great for dogs. Now, actually, apologies, I should reiterate. Chocolate and THC specifically, because you can give CBD to your dogs, but you don't want to give CBD to your dogs in chocolate form. Keep that for yourself. Now, what about sourcing chocolate? There's a couple of differences between your bean to bar varieties and your commercial chocolate. And what's the difference and why does it matter for edibles? I think what you're going to find is bean to bar chocolate offers higher quality and better flavor, but it can be pricier. So bean to bar chocolate is going to typically be made by small scale artisans who control the entire process from sourcing the cacao beans to crafting the final product. The focus is on the quality, the flavor, and ethical practices in harvesting that chocolate. It often uses single origin cacao beans, which highlight the unique flavor profiles. If you didn't know, chocolate can have different flavor profiles depending on where it's grown, where it's from. And it's more expensive, but offers a superior taste and texture. And I did an episode a little while ago now with Madame Cannoli. And she is the wife of the late, great Frenchie Cannoli, the master Hashishin. But she in her own right has a very developed palate. And she wrote a lot of the course work for the Gangier program around using your palate, developing it, and learning how to taste. And we cover that pretty extensively in the episode that I did with her. So I'll link to it in the show notes so you can find it, because a lot of the ways that she works on developing palate and taste is through single origin chocolate. So that can be a fun project for you to try if you want to sort of experiment with taste and flavors. Now, bean to bar chocolate can obviously be more expensive, but offers a superior taste and texture. Alternatively, commercial chocolate is mass-produced by large companies using bulk cacao beans. I'm having trouble saying that today. It often contains additives like soy lecithin, vanilla, extra sugar to standardize the flavor and to reduce costs. There's also less transparency in sourcing and production practices, and that can often be very problematic. But it is affordable and widely available, but lacks the complexity of a bean to bar chocolate. I do recall also Madame Cannoli talking about things like lecithin and looking on the ingredient list to try and avoid those if you're looking to buy chocolate for tasting as well. Now, of course, we have the different cacao percentages. You go to the store and not only do you have to think bean to bar or commercial chocolate options, but there's dark chocolate, milk chocolate, white chocolate. What's the best for edibles? Now, right off the bat, dark chocolate, 70% cacao is ideal for infusions due to its robust flavor and high fat content. But let's look at them all. So dark chocolate is usually between 50 and 100% of cacao solids. So that's your cacao and your cacao butter. It's bitter, rich, and intense in flavor. And it's ideal for edibles due to its high fat content and robust flavor, which masks the cannabis as well. And because THC is fat soluble, you want the high fat content because it's going to take in more of that cannabinoid that we are all looking to get elevated with. Then you have milk chocolate, and that also contains cacao solids, milk powder, and sugar. Is usually creamy, sweet with a mild flavor. It's less ideal for edibles because the milk can dilute the potency of the cannabis infusions. Having said that, I have used milk chocolate on occasion. It's delicious, of course, because it has that extra milk and sugar in it. So you can still do it, of course. And then there's white chocolate. And that is made from cacao butter, sugar, and milk solids, but no cacao solids. That's actually something I didn't know until I started working on this episode. It's got a sweet, buttery, and mild flavor, and it works for edibles as well, but it lacks the depth of flavor and the dark chocolate provides. Why cacao butter is better for infusions? Cacao butter is the pure fat extracted from cacao beans. It's ideal for infusions because it's 100% fat, making it a highly efficient carrier for THC and other cannabinoids. It has a neutral flavor that won't compete with the chocolate. It creates a smoother, more stable product compared to using tinctures. And I do recall when my daughter had her vegan gluten-free restaurant, cacao butter was used pretty regularly in a lot of the desserts that they were making, and they were delicious. You never would have guessed that they were vegan at all, but I mean, maybe you don't need to when you have that much chocolate going around. So, and I also have infused cacao butter actually to make topicals too. And Amanda Breeze's book, I had her on the show a little while ago, not too long ago actually, to talk about topicals and a few other subjects as well, but she is a true expert in the realm of topicals. And in her cookbook, her topicals cookbook that she put out, there is a cacao lotion bar, and you infuse the cacao butter. And I use that pretty regularly on my lower back because one, it's nice because it's also easy to transport. If I have to go somewhere, I just have to put it in a little jar or container of some kind, but then it warms in your hands and you just rub it on your sore spots. For me, that's my lower back, and it's lovely. And it smells fantastic too. Cacao butter has a lovely smell. So it naturally smells good. So there's a lot of ways that you can use cacao butter for things other than just eating. Now, of course, chocolate does have a bit of a dark side, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the ethical sourcing of chocolate. It's something that I do think about often when I am shopping for ingredients, when I'm making edibles, and when I'm just trying to feed myself. The dark side of chocolate is that child labor and unsustainable farming practices are pretty prevalent, especially as you move closer to the commercial side of chocolate when you're buying commercial chocolate from huge companies. And so if you can, choosing fair trade and ethically sourced chocolate can really help make a difference. The chocolate industry really does have a troubling history of exploitative labor practices, including using child labor and unsustainable farming in the cacao producing regions like West Africa. I often try to buy fair trade whenever possible because I really hate the idea of the farmers at the other end in far-flung areas of the world not being able to even make a living doing the farming so that I can have chocolate over here. I also buy fair trade coffee as well, because I also go to my local farmers market and I like to talk to the farmers that are growing the food that I buy at the farmers market. And I really do feel that farmers feed the world, whether they're making, growing the local root vegetables that I'm enjoying in the wintertime or the coffee and the chocolate that I'm consuming. I drink coffee every day and chocolate's more of a treat, but farmers feed families. And I want to support companies that are not trying to do things cheaply so that they can make more money. Because at the end of the day, the consumer still pays. It's the large companies that end up making all the money at the expense of the people who are growing the food with which their product would not be possible. So I'll get off my soapbox a little bit there, but that's how I feel about that. You can look for certifications when you're buying chocolate. And if you do find brands that are using certifications like Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance, and Direct Trade, then that means they've been vetted for these practices. Fair Trade ensures fair wages and safe working conditions for the people growing the chocolate or whatever else it is that they're producing. The Rainforest Alliance promotes sustainable farming practices so that those people can continue farming in the way that they've known for as long as possible. They can maintain their lifestyle. And Direct Trade builds relationships between farmers and the chocolate makers. So you can also do this by supporting small brands. The bean to bar chocolate makers often prioritize ethical sourcing and transparency because that's how they're getting a better practice. And do your research. Now, you can find brands that are known for their commitment to ethical practices relatively easily. It also depends on where you shop sometimes, but I find a lot of these brands are often available at larger grocery stores. You don't necessarily have to go to a specialty store to find them. So just something to keep in mind. I know sometimes they can be a bit more expensive, and we all have to make decisions as to whether that's something that can fit into our budget or not. It's something that I like to do, and I encourage others to do it whenever possible, but we all have to do what's right for ourselves. Now, cooking and baking with chocolate. There is a term called tempering chocolate, and we're going to talk about why it's important for edibles. And I'll talk quickly about how to do it at home. And then I'll be sure to include a video in the show notes on the website on how to do it. Admittedly, I've never actually tempered chocolate myself, but when I was reading this, I was like, I can see why it would be important because tempering is the process of carefully melting and cooling chocolate to stabilize its crystals, giving it a glossy finish, crisp snap, and smooth texture. So I think you can probably imagine when you take a chocolate bar, especially that bean to bar stuff, or I guess anything commercially made as well, and you break it and you hear that snap, that's tempered chocolate. Untempered chocolate can look dull, feel grainy, and melt too easily. Now, depending on your application, this may not matter too much, and this is probably why I've never actually tempered chocolate. I have met chocolate makers in the past who obviously have to temper their chocolate because the presentation of their chocolate is part of why we buy. You go into a chocolate shop, there's a couple of beautiful, actually one just closed, sadly. A chocolate shop in my town closed, and he had beautiful chocolate. And of course that was likely all tempered because that visual presentation of his creations, and they were art, tempts you to buy. But if you're making something for yourself, maybe, the chocolate looking a little dull, grainy, and melting too easily isn't as big of a concern, especially if you're making it yourself. If you're making it for somebody else, that might change a little bit as well. But it's easy for me to keep something in the fridge because I'm not transporting it anywhere. And if I make a batch of something, I'm going to be eating it. It's infused. It's something I enjoy. And the presentation may not matter quite as much as it would otherwise. But in case you want to know how to temper chocolate, I'll include it in the show notes just so you have an idea of how to do it, because basically you're melting down the chocolate. You're breaking your chocolate down, you're melting it, and you're bringing it to a certain temperature, and then you're testing a small amount on parchment paper to get a glossy finish. So Yes, I'll include something in the show notes around that if you're interested, because it can be an important step that you might want to take. Next, how do you infuse chocolate? There's a couple of different ways that you can do this. The one way is to infuse your cacao butter. So you would decarb your cannabis. And if you're unsure of how to do that, I have episodes and you can find information on my website, or I have the beginner's guide to making edibles over at the Bite Me Cannabis Club that is free for anybody to take. It's just a quick course on making edibles, but you're going to decarb your cannabis and you're going to combine your cannabis with the cacao butter. You can do it in a double broiler. You can also do it in a glass jar in a pot of water. That's a method that I use very often. I actually admittedly used a device last time. I did it in the Ardent in an infusion sleeve to reduce the mess. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but the double broiler or in a jar in a pot on the stove are obviously two ways you can do it without fancy equipment. And then you're going to strain it through a fine mesh sieve and some cheesecloth to remove the plant material, and then you have infused cacao butter to make chocolate and other recipes. And of course, you can also use a tincture method, which is where you would add a few drops of tincture or a concentrate. I think concentrates would also work very well here. Think your RSOs, your FICOs, that kind of thing. And you're going to add it to the melted chocolate and mix it really thoroughly. And this method is quicker, but depending if you're using a tincture, it might adjust the flavor just a little bit. You're probably going to run into that less if you're using a concentrate like an RSO or a FICO, but that's just something to be aware of. And of course, you're going to want to calculate the dose of whatever it is that you're making per piece, so that you have a good idea of how potent these things are, at least a framework. And there's a lot of different ways to accomplish that as well. You can do the good old-fashioned math, which is most people feel really intimidated by. But if you go to my website, I do have also an online calculator that you can plug some numbers into and figure it out that way. And if you scroll to the very bottom of that page, I do include the actual math. So if you want to try it out with the, good old fashioned pen and paper, and then maybe you can use the calculator as well to see how they compare. Sometimes this is a bit of a guessing game, because if you started with plant material that you grew yourself, you may not be entirely sure of how strong the plant material is. So you're kind of guessing, but I still think it's really important to give yourself a benchmark or some context for how strong these are. Because even if you're guessing a little bit, you're going to have a range. You can always start low and go slow, which is always the recommended advice. And you'll hear that everywhere. And there's a reason for that. Chocolate edibles can be deceivingly potent, and that's because they are such a good carrier with the fat content for THC. So they might hit you a little bit harder. So if you make something, and even if you figure out how potent they are, but you're using some figures that you're kind of having to guess a little bit, then don't be afraid to sort of take that serving and just reduce it by half or something, just to give yourself an idea, because we don't want you to have a bad time. Next, the last thing I wanted to talk about is some surprising uses for chocolate in edibles. Because, of course, when you think of recipe ideas for chocolate, we think of brownies, which I love. And I do have some brownie recipes on the website. I do believe I've done some episodes around brownies, if I recall. Now that I'm getting 5 years into this and I've done so many recipes, sometimes I do tend to forget what I've already done. You could do chocolate dipped strawberries or pretzels. You can do chocolate mousses. You can do chocolate chip cookies. There's so many wonderful things you can make with chocolate. One of my favorite recipes actually on the website is a chocolate coffee torte that was a recipe that was given to me by Chef Lucas, a fellow Gangier out of Berlin, Germany. And I love that cake. It's so good. And I might have to make that again because it was delicious. So lots of wonderful ways to infuse chocolate. But what if you're not really a sweets person? Or what if you're kind of just tired of the old tropes of the pot brownie? Well, what if you tried a mole? Mole is a rich, complex sauce from Mexican cuisine made with a blend of chilies, spices, nuts, seeds, and, yes, chocolate. And it's often served over meats like turkey or chicken, and the chocolate adds depth and richness without making the sauce sweet. And often chocolate is used quite a bit in some of those Mexican cuisines, so it's sort of an interesting way to try incorporating chocolate without doing the traditional stuff. And I think I'm going to have to try it again. I have enjoyed mole in Mexico before, and it is definitely different and as rich as they say. And of course, anything with chilies and spices in it is something that I'm going to say yes to. And as far as the cannabis infused mole, you infuse the oil or fat used in the recipe with cannabis for a unique, savory edible experience. Now, here's another idea for you. What about chocolate and steak? Yes, chocolate and steak are a match made in culinary heaven. Cacao powder and a dry rub adds a deep, earthy flavor that complements the richness of the meat. So what you could do is try mixing cacao powder, smoked paprika, chili powder, garlic powder, salt and pepper, and rub it generously onto a steak before grilling or searing. And the cacao can enhance the umami flavors and create a delicious crust. Now, that's not necessarily infused. In that particular instance, you might want to find a barbecue sauce of some kind or some kind of sauce that would pair nicely with a chocolate rub steak. And that's something I didn't really think about before I did this episode, actually, until right now. So maybe I'll have to find something for the episode webpage again of something that would pair beautifully with a chocolate rubbed steak, because I've not tried that before, but I love rubs. And I make them often and have them on hand for when I want to do some grilling. I do barbecue a lot in the summertime because I don't want to be inside. But pretty much from June until September, I'm outside cooking. So I'm definitely going to be trying this. Of course, you can also explore chocolate drinks. There are cannabis hot chocolates. I know I've done a Mexican hot chocolate for Bite Me. You could try chocolate martinis. You could try beauty and self-care products, like maybe a DIY cannabis-infused chocolate face mask, which sounds lovely, and because that will include antioxidants and relaxation together. There's so many things that you can do. Fun fact for you, the ancient Aztecs used chocolate as a currency and believed it had magical properties. I don't think they are wrong. So here's a few pro tips and common mistakes you may want to avoid. First of all, you don't want to overheat chocolate. Chocolate is delicate, and overheating can ruin the texture and potency of your infusion. So this is a good time to make sure you have a thermometer on hand, just to make sure if you need it, you can make sure that you're keeping your chocolate at the correct temperature for whatever recipe it is that you're following. Storage tips: you want to keep your edibles in a cool, dark place to prevent melting and to preserve freshness. And this is going to be important, especially if you didn't temper your chocolate, which, as I said, I have never tempered chocolate before, so this would apply to myself as well. As always, labeling is super important. I will say this until my last dying breath. Label, label, label. You want to avoid accidental consumption, and if you label, then hopefully that won't happen. And of course, depending on what you're making, if it's something that's going into a mold, using cannabis-specific molds can be really helpful. I really like the molds that might have a little imprint of a cannabis leaf or something like that, because that just indicates to the person, additionally, that it's infused, as well as the label you put on your container. And last, experiment. Don't be afraid to mix chocolate with other flavors like chili, sea salt, orange, my favorite, caramel. I mean, all those things are wonderful, but mixing chocolate with other flavors, it pairs so beautifully with so many things that you can really get creative and experiment in the kitchen. Chocolate is the ultimate edible medium. It's versatile, it's delicious, it's perfect for infusions. So if you try making your own cannabis chocolate at home, I would love it if you would tag me in your creations, if you post them on Instagram, or let me know. You can send me, you can get a hold of me however you want to. I love to see what people are making and love to hear people experimenting. If you know somebody who is into chocolate, please consider sharing this episode with them, because they might learn something along with you. You can, as I said, always talk to me Talk to me via email, the podcast hotline, fan mail, DMs on Instagram. There's lots of ways to get a hold of me. Some of those, if you scroll down to the bottom of the episode webpage, you will find the email and the link to the podcast hotline there. Valentine's Day can be sort of a mixed bag. It can really generate a lot of emotions in a lot of different people. It is quite a commercial holiday. I have mixed feelings about it myself. But you know what won't be disappointing on Valentine's Day? The products and services on the Margaret Recommends page. So check those out as well before you pick up something that might help you on your edibles journey. I think that's it for this week, my friends. I am your host, Margaret, and until next time, stay chocolatey and stay high. Enjoyed the episode? Why not share it with a friend? The more the merrier. Or you can leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite listening platform. It all helps spread the word about Bite Me, the show about edibles, so that fellow edibles enthusiasts can make great edibles at home.